there, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Check Out This Record podcast. My name is Frank, and with me is my good buddy Mark.
Heyo!
This is the podcast where we talk about all sorts of musical goodness. We review albums we have never heard of before, suggest albums to each other to review, and we have a wide variety of musical discussions. You can check us out on Instagram and YouTube. If you like what we have to say, please feel free to leave us a review, and please leave us a 5-star review. Now, you may like us, you may also think we're music snobs, and we are, and that's okay. However, if you can escape with us just for a little bit, then we've done our jobs. So, Mark, I throw it to you. How are you, my man?
Frankie, I'm good, man. I've been having fun finding the wrappers of food I thought I hid from myself for the quarantine. Otherwise, I'm really pumped for this week's episode. I recommended Turnstile's Nonstop Feelings for you, and can't wait to hear what you think of it. But you wanted to talk about today. What's today? The quarantine's got me completely lost with time and space.
Every day is the same, right?
Mm-hmm.
So today it's May the 4th. Sorry, May the 4th. And obviously people do other things on May the 4th, but it's the anniversary actually of the passing of Adam Yauch, a.k.a. MCA, from the Beastie Boys. So I'd figure say a few words on him, Mark, if you don't mind.
You know what? I don't know a whole lot about the Beastie Boys or MCA specifically outside of their early demos, which somebody slid me a copy of in high school when Intergalactic came out. And I was like, this really isn't for me. And then they slid me that, and it was pretty cool. And then I always liked License to Ill and Ill Communications, but I never really got deep with them. So I don't have a ton of knowledge about them. I know people love them, but why don't you tell us a little bit about them?
Okay, absolutely, man. So MCA is the name from the name came from the Masters of Ceremonies, and the A from Adam, so MCA. Born in Brooklyn, taught himself how to play bass, and he was a fan of hardcore punk, which is ironic for this episode. And the Beasties were, a vital part of music. If there was any band to break the barriers and incorporates everything into one, definitely that was them. There are too many people out there, though, who just automatically would be like, oh, I love Brass Monkey and Fight for Your Right. But Mark, as you can imagine, as we are album enthusiasts, they're way more than that. And this guy, he died way too young at 47 from cancer of the saliva gland. So I feel the best way to tribute someone is to talk about their life and maybe find out some cool things about them. So real quick, prior to making their second album, Paul's Boutique, Adam Yauch had a rock band called Brooklyn with Daryl Jennifer of Bad Brains, and they recorded an album's worth of classic rock-inspired demos. I try to find it, but Mark, wouldn't you be interested to hear that one?
I would love to hear it, and I tried today. I couldn't find it.
Darn. Before the Beasties' international fame, Adam Yauch released several 12 inches on Def Jam as MCA and Berzuti. That's another interesting tidbit. He also handwrote a clause in his will that states that the Beasties' music should not be used for commercial licensing. The clause reads, "In no event may my image or name or any music or any artistic property created by me be used for advertising purposes." When asked if this is true, Mike D of the Beastie Boys said yes, and it was really important to Yauch, and that was really an important stance. He was a practicing Buddhist. Which is pretty interesting and pretty cool. So he seemed like a very centered guy, very peaceful guy, harnessed his chi, so to speak. As far as influence to me, real quick, like any other pioneer, he's pushing that envelope and the boundaries to see what else is out there. I mean, the work on something like Paul's Boutique alone could expand someone's horizons, and it's applicable to anything, not just music. So, I'd say the opening of the perspective and the consistency of performance is what I took away from someone like MCA. So, and it's his anniversary of his passing. So on to you, man.
Yeah, 8 years. It's crazy he's been gone that long, right? So, like I said, I admittedly don't know the Beastie Boys probably as well as I should. And I think over the next week or so, that's something I'm going to take a time to dip into certainly some of the earlier albums, some of the later stuff, like the Intergalactic, whatnot. I remember from high school, but maybe dip back in. But I was thinking, being that the Beastie Boys were so well known for pushing the envelope of everything they did, and being, one of New York City's pride and joy, why don't we do a top 5 list of really awesome New York City bands of their general era?
Yeah, absolutely, man. Let's do
I
it.
thought that might be fun. You think that'd be cool?
Yeah, let's do it, man. Let's do it.
So I'm going to kick it off. I think this is going to throw you off a little bit for my first pick.
Hit me, man. Hit me.
Kiss.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, listen. So I don't like Kiss, right? I used to like Kiss, and I can own that. I've seen them live, and that's actually what I think Kiss did that's so important, right? Is they brought back appreciating the audience and giving the audience a show in the late 70s when music was becoming less and less about theatrics and giving the listener, especially in a live setting, their due. So for me, Kiss is one of those New York bands that really said, like, hey, look, New York City's synonymous with Broadway. Why aren't we putting on bigger shows? And they found a way to do it and do it really cool. Admittedly, all of those records suck except for their live ones. So, number 4 for me is Anthrax. I love Anthrax. I love their willingness to push, heavy metal and thrash metal into new directions. Be the underdog, but still be really consistent and really awesome. Which is the exact same thing you could say about the next band, Living Colour. A Cult of Personalities. Just such a cool band, super underrated, but never cared what anybody thought and did their own thing.
Right.
Number 2, White Zombie.
Yeah.
Specifically White Zombie.
Specifically, right.
Right. White Zombie just had a cool vibe to them. They took whatever influences they had and really just let it take over their stage show, their albums, everything that they wanted to do. They really took it to the extreme, and I think the Beastie Boys would have truly appreciated that.
Yeah.
And then for me, number 1, I went with a really awesome punk rock band. I went with Leftover Crack.
There you go.
Ska, punk, no gods, no masters, or no gods, no managers.
Yeah.
Just this idea of punk rock that's supposed to mean something, but we're still kind of drunk and just having a ton of fun. It really had, and especially if you go back to those Beastie Boys early demos, I really feel like Leftover Crack learned a lot from the Beastie Boys.
Yeah, I like it, man. I like it. The Kiss did throw me off, though, not going to lie.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's why I put it there. I didn't want to put the Bee Gees or anything.
Are they from New York, though? Or?
No, I think they're Sweden or something. I don't know. I just imagine them in Studio 54. Like that, to me, in my head, when somebody's like, oh, Studio 54, everyone went and did cocaine, blah, blah, blah. I just imagine perpetually that the Bee Gees were playing.
Yeah.
So,
but
so maybe funny. That's, a stereotype. I don't know.
Love it.
What do you think? What do you got?
All right. So, a lot of those, I'm going to have one that's similar on the list. And I have a couple different ones here. So number 5 is the Talking Heads. It's so funny, though. I must say that we're talking about all these different kind of genres right now in an episode where we're going to kind of even peel back some of those layers, and it can give us a headache, and I think it might have earlier. But so here we go. Talking Heads. They I don't know how they ever got thrusted into like a punk category or a post punk or whatever you want to call it, but they were new wave. They integrated elements of art rock, some funk, I guess if you want to call it punk sensibility, even though they were playing at CBGB's in the late 70s and stuff like that. But I think the Talking Heads, based out of New York City, I definitely think they're a band that was important. Number 4, Mark, Run DMC.
There you go.
Right, Run DMC. I remember specifically, absolutely. I was in Atlantic City, and on the boardwalk there, that people had their boom boxes and they were blasting Run DMC, and I'm like, "What is this? This is awesome!" And of course, Walk This Way, which is that version with Aerosmith, is way better than the regular Aerosmith version. King of Rock. There were another ones kind of just like the Beastie Boys where they were kind of pushing that envelope. Yes, this is how they got their start, but they were much more than that. And Run DMC from New York, obviously. Here's number 3. They Might Be Giants, Mark.
I didn't know that they were. I just assumed that they were from Ohio.
They're from Brooklyn. And listen, huge college rock hits. I mean, and to a lot of people from that kind of arena absolutely loved them. They had an absurd style of their alternative take on alternative music, very humorous stuff, unconventional instruments, unconventional vocal placements. That album Flood, which has Particle Man and Istanbul, Constantinople. I mean, those are staples in their little indie rock genre. Yes, they did Hot Dog from Mickey Mouse Clubhouse too, just so everyone knows. But that's another band. Mark, I'm going to steal one from you, Anthrax. Hope you don't mind.
Hell yeah. No, absolutely.
Yeah, Bring the Noise. I used to have Attack of the Killer Bees on tape, and that thing was absolutely awesome. I'm the Man 91. I'm the Man, the original, the remix. Got the Time, the Joe Jackson cover. I mean, just so many things. They pushed those boundaries. Yes, they were a metal band. Yes, they were a thrash metal band, but they liked other stuff too, and I like that. I like those influences poking up. And the last one, speaking of thrash metal or hardcore punk or whatever you want to call it, is the Cro-Mags from New York City. Again, they, if not the first, they were one of the first to fuse the hardcore punk with thrash metal. Again, now we're getting into genres again, but they were one of the first ones to have done that. Very thrashy, some metal influences in there. A lot of things they did had a crossover feel to it. Of course, from New York. They were around 81 to 2002. Then they came back in 2008 and are currently performing. But yeah, that rounds off my top 5. Mark, the Cro-Mags.
Yeah, I think we did New York City proud. I mean, I'm not from there, so I don't know.
Well, I'm from Long Island, and people will say, "Well, you're not really from New York," but
fair enough. Well, it's time for the review.
It is time.
Yay! So, as I mentioned, this week is Turnstile's Nonstop Feelings, released January 13th, 2015.
Mm-hmm.
On Reaper Records. It would then be reissued on vinyl a year later when they signed to major label Roadrunner Records. This is the band's debut LP. However, they did have 2 previous EPs, which you can find online, actually packaged as a full album, but it's actually 2 EPs. Anyways, go listen to it. The band formed in Baltimore 2010 as part of a growing hardcore scene, and have been a progressive force within that scene ever since. Now, before we get too deep into the review, Frank and I wanted to share part of that conversation. You've been hearing us talk about genres and subgenres a little bit already this episode, and kind of hinting that we needed to talk about it.
Yeah.
And we do need to talk about it because it's going to be one of those things that, when you're recommending a record to your buddy, and they go, all right, what the hell are you giving me? You got to be able to communicate it in a way that they're going to know what they're getting into, or they're not, right? Frank likes to give a little more information. I like to scare him and tell him as little as possible.
Pretty much.
So why don't you kind of kick us off with what you wanted to start with, and we'll kind of backfill and flesh out the rest of the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it drove us maybe a little bit nutty, these genres and these subgenres. And we were talking about it. We could have been talking about it for all day today, but if not, there was at least for 75% of the day. And I'm like, okay, so this is hardcore. But I'm like, there's hardcore punk, and there's thrash punk, and there's just punk, and then there's just hardcore, right? And then these metal elements. So what does it all mean at the end of the day? So if we just talk about hardcore, brief history, the band DOA, their album Hardcore 81 is apparently how the term caught fire. Hardcore means slower, more intentional, more focused, and on rhythm and almost grooves as opposed to melody. Okay, so I feel if we're going to talk about these subgenres and what what these all mean, and we're going to get Mark's take on this as well, because it is a little bit confusing. The only way to sort through is to talk about then the music and the musicality of it, because listen, you can't just base it off of the lyrical content. I mean, if that was the case, then no 2-bit crap pop star should be singing about anything seriously, right? But some do, even though the songs are crap, but some do, right? So you have to look at, okay, it's the music. So if we're just talking about music, what is punk, right, Mark? Punk is fast drums. Mark, you know that. We're in a punk band, right?
Mm-hmm.
Fast and palm muting guitars, not really focused on being technical, aggressive. What's hardcore? Well, I just said slower, focused on rhythm, grooves, breakdowns, lower guitar tunings, right? You're not in standard E or in D. Some even take it a step, even more of a step down to C, or then you get into the flat tunings. Well, what's hardcore punk? Well, it's heavy, short, fast punk songs, but for the most part, they're still in regular standard E tuning. And then, of course, you want to throw metal and make everyone's life a headache as well, because metal is, has more elements of hardcore punk, and then you throw thrash in there. So those were just my initial takes on everything. And I know you're very savvy kind of on this subject, Mark. So why don't you talk a little bit about it?
Yeah, so music genres and subgenres become an absolute sticky mess, right? And it's one of those things nobody wants, the running joke between Frank and I will be, that band, this is the Diet Coke version of that band, right?
Yes.
And typically, we're referring to two bands that play within the same genre, or even more specifically, same subgenre. But it kind of gets sticky from there, because you don't want bands that all sound the same, right? Maybe sonically there are similarities, but you don't want them to sound the same, because why aren't I just listening to the same band? Why would I listen to your version of that band? So it gets sticky in that way. But hardcore, and particularly, you make a great reference in DOA's Hardcore 81, Canadian punk legends, by the way. Hardcore is just shorthand for hardcore punk rock, right? Which becomes this other weird thing of, as bands begin to define themselves, and they say, well, I'm hardcore, I'm not hardcore punk rock. You go, well, but hardcore is just shorthand for hardcore punk rock. And I think we have to look, kind of at that narrowing kind of ice cream cone of music when it comes to genres and subgenres, and where things come, what's that beginning point that holds all the ice cream at the bottom of the cone? And as we stretch out, what are these, the ends and the bits where the waffle cone connects, and all the different styles, right?
So hungry right now. But
I know, right? There's not another Baskin Robbins reference coming, by the way. So don't worry, I'm not going to mess that one up. So it becomes this very odd thing, right? So where does hardcore fit on this kind of three-dimensional, my cat apparently has an opinion, this three-dimensional image of music when it comes to genres, right? Like, we can agree to an extent that rock and roll for the most part is somewhere towards the tip of the cone, and then you get punk rock, and then from punk rock you've got maybe heavy metal next to it, and then those two things go up and they meet in a lot of different places. Hardcore is going to be one of those styles and sounds that branches off of punk rock, but maybe leans more in a different direction. And that's kind of where this thing gets really weird.
Yeah.
So for me, because we could certainly fight over what punk means all day, right? Like,
oh my gosh.
I'm not one. I don't think that Patti Smith qualifies as punk rock, but because she played CBGBs the same time that the Talking Heads and the Ramones did, she was classified as punk rock.
Yeah, and I think earlier today we even talked ourselves into the fact that it means nothing, punk or something.
Right, and it kind of does, and that's my issue with the term punk and punk rock, is that in the beginning it was a throwaway term that just meant we don't know what the fuck this is.
Yes.
Right? Everybody was punk rock in the beginning. You look at bands like the Sex Pistols, who suck, the Clash, the Ramones, DOA, right? I mean,
yeah.
Their first album came out in 1978, so I mean, we're not talking too far behind the Clash and the Ramones. All of those bands somehow fit within the same genre. So, but none of those bands sound alike.
Right.
Right? I mean,
yeah,
so
they don't.
how do we differentiate? And that's where this subgenre thing comes from. And I think what's important to know about hardcore is that while what Frank thinks of as hardcore with this slower, more groove driven than necessarily angry and faster is, if you were in a band with us, darker, meaner, faster. I think you're going to see that. This record in particular highlights its influences, and its influences clearly include some punk rock, because there's some really fun kind of punch in the gut punk rock stuff that you're not really expecting, especially because it kind of lulls you into these grooves, and then they hit you, which I think is really phenomenal. But we'll kind of get into that a little more later. I think why don't we just go ahead? I think I've babbled enough on genres and subgenres.
You want to talk about the album?
Yeah, let's talk about that. And if by all means, folks listening at home or on the bus, or you're probably not on a bus right now, wherever you are listening, we'd be open to having conversations about genres and subgenres and kind of really getting into it. If that's something you guys want, let us know, because otherwise, this is. We've all seen Shrek. This is an onion we've got to unpeel, and nobody likes unpeeling onions.
Yeah, me and Mark totally find this fascinating. So please throw it at us.
So if you got a question, if you want to talk about it, we certainly can. Because just Google different types of hardcore music. That's a very important word. Hardcore music. You're going to see all kinds of stuff that I thought I had a pretty good grasp on all the different styles of music. There is so much more made up crap. I shouldn't say that. Look, the sounds and styles typically either come from a time or a place where that's what the bands had to work with. Yep. And you end up with these different things. So that's where a lot of it comes from. And, now that we've become much more modernized and you can listen to anything from anywhere, influences are going to be far more blended. So that said, if you want to hear us yak about that, you got questions, you know how to leave us comments. We'll be happy to answer them or talk more about them on the show if you guys want to do that. But for now, Frank.
Yeah. So I figure, and this was your suggestion to me, so if it's cool, I want to give kind of my initial takes. I have some cool things I researched about the band, and then we kind of get right into it, right?
Sure.
So, Turnstile. This band is real, and they bring it. And what is it that you asked that they bring? Well, for the purist out there, it's a throwback to the early days of, hardcore, however you want to define that, but with 90s influences. I had to look several times as to when they were formed and when the release date of this album was, because it really captured an initial feeling and a buzz, and it felt almost new. Singer Brandon Yates, he's a throwback. First of all, the guy's built, and I want to ask him about his workout routine. I know you do too, Mark.
Yeah, I was going to bring up your notes about this. You seemed pretty interested in the physique of this guy.
The guy's built. And as someone who tries to work out and tries to get in shape, I was like, man, I just would love to know what a chest day looks like and a bicep day looks like for him. So, Brandon, you're out there, you're listening, just throw me some workout tips. That's it. That's all. It's important. So,
sure,
he plays shirtless a lot too. It kind of reminded me of Mark's favorite, Iggy Pop. I know it's not your favorite, and like a Jim Morrison type character for some reason. Vocal tone, you get that Rage Against the Machine at the drive-in type feel, and then they sneak in those 90 influences. I heard some 311 in there. Tight musically, short, airy moments. In fact, there's a lot of musical real estate in these songs, which is both a good and could be a bad thing. But Mark, do you get that kind of Rage Against the Machine and at the drive-in type singing?
I do. There are spots where he's doing a little kind of yelling, singing. There's a little bit of singing. There's a little bit of kind of Pennywise talk singing. A little bit, far less of that. I think you kind of nailed it. He's not as rappy as a Zach De La Rocha, but there's definitely a Rage Against the Machine feel lyrically. Maybe not lyrically. In terms of his vocal styling. Along with the very dominant rhythm section of this band.
Yeah, totally. And I found some cool, actually some cool facts out about them if you want to go through those real quick.
Yeah, you left this part of the script blank, so I'm interested to see what you came up with.
Sure, you like that element of
Yeah,
surprise, my
little
friend.
mystery. He's going to tell me
Yeah.
that they're like sworn members of the Nazi party. Now I got to feel bad for liking this band.
No, not at all. So they're best friends. No shock, but that's kind of cool, right? Hey,
Yeah. All
right?
5 of them?
They just said they've been best friends for a long time, so I'm assuming all 5 of them.
Okay.
It's probably 2 of them, but anyway, they're hardcore kids through and through, Mark. So again, what does that mean? But some members at the age of 16 were taking buses from DC to Philly to go to hardcore shows. I wonder if they were seeing like Lifetime and stuff like that.
I mean, because I think they're in like the 25 to 30-year-old range now.
Yeah.
So if we're talking about this album came out 5 years ago, if we're talking when they formed in 2010, we're talking 10 years ago. I mean, they could have been 2010, seeing some Painted Black shows,
Yeah,
seeing some
Kid Dynamite.
Some Kid Dynamite, very possible. That Philly hardcore scene, very underrated, but pretty cool. There's some good bands in there.
Absolutely. They have like a mission in the band, and it's they want to bring people together and have like a good time, which watching their shows on YouTube, that's what it seemed like to me, which is pretty cool. They're experimental, not afraid of it. Obviously, the album after this showcases some of that. They're influenced by catchy and groove style of music. Again, that groove we're talking about. I mean, that's the best way to describe it, right, Mark? Kind of that groove with the guitars that they're doing.
What I really like about this, and certainly we'll dive into it with each when we do the track by track for you folks, is that they find a really good way to blend some really cool kind of guitar riffs, not kind of, but actual cool guitar riffs with this really cool grooving rhythm section.
Yeah.
And do some really interesting things with it. There is a little bit of keyboard in there as well. There's, I think they're doing a little bit of effects to his voice.
I could see that.
For a few places in this, I don't know if it's just a reverb thing or if actual. I don't think they're auto tuning or anything. Like I think they're just reverb on them, which would make sense. Hardcore show kids cupping the mic and just kind of screaming at each other. That'll happen. So yeah, I mean, I think that's a fair description of it.
Yeah. They dress like normal kids. They don't subscribe to some unspoken code of how they need to look, which is cool. And lastly, their live shows are intense and amazing. So those are some fun facts about Turnstile, Mark.
Nice. Now, that last fact, did you get that from watching YouTube videos, or was there a website that said that?
No, there was a website that said that, and the amazing part was from the watching of the shows on YouTube.
You weren't distracted by his abs or anything. You were able to watch the performance without.
No, but I'm also now wondering about not only the workout plan but the diet plan as well. Like kind of
right.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of these kids are vegan,
no carbs, no sugars. Yeah, exactly.
You brought something up, and just since we're spending so much time talking about genres and how genres get kind of messy, right? There was an interesting thing when you look at the kind of West Coast second wave of punk rock.
Oh yeah.
You're talking about bands like Black Flag and the Circle Jerks, where in the first wave, specifically the Sex Pistols and the image that they wanted to portray. And I say image very specifically because you needed to dress up. You needed to have a leather jacket with something vulgar written on it. You needed to do, you had to have makeup on. You had to do this. And then this weird thing happened where hardcore shows would, hardcore punk rock shows would happen, and kids were showing up in gym clothes, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Kind of fighting each other, but listening to this more aggressive music. So it became this weird thing. So it becomes this thing that people think of as like synonymous. They, like when you go to a punk rock show, if a guy's wearing gym shorts, he's some jock and he's just there to beat you up. But if you think back to one of our favorite bands, the Descendents, those guys showed up and played in whatever they were going to sleep in, right? Because it wasn't important. The style of dress wasn't as important as the music, and I think that's one of the things where hardcore punk rock, and hardcore itself, whatever that subgenre is, part of what's become ingrained in those is that it's less about the fashion, right? Like when we see emo was very much about hairstyles and outfits, and that original wave of punk rock was about the outfits. You get these weird subgenres where that becomes a thing, or you look at these styles where, like, Henry Rollins is just wearing a pair of gym shorts on stage, like, and that's it.
Yeah.
So it becomes this weird thing of, we have a habit of placing, what's the word I want to use here? Cliches upon
Yep.
genres. And what we do is not listen to bands that are really fucking awesome, because we go, well, I don't like those kids who dress up to go to shows.
Yeah. Exactly. And do you remember the movie SLC Punk, Mark?
I do. I still hate that movie.
Yeah, I know you do. I bring it up because
I was going to say, not as much as I hate the sequel, but go ahead.
I didn't even give the sequel a chance.
Do yourself a favor and don't. It's an hour and a half of my life I'll never get back.
But there is one part where he's explaining kind of that he has this friend who was as punk as anyone, and he dressed in collared shirts and black rimmed glasses, almost similar to a Milo character from Descendents. So yeah, that just proves the point of what you were saying, because it has nothing to do with fashion and everything to do about music.
Right. So it's just interesting, when we look at these subgenres, and there certainly are, like, there's the subgenre of crust punk, right, where those kids basically look like they live in alleys, but it's cool, and you're like, what? That doesn't make any sense. Why would looking like you live in an alley be cool? But people dig it, and it goes with the style of music. It's this weird thing. But who knows? Maybe I'm stereotyping crust punk kids, and
so it makes me think of that show we played once. I know you don't remember it because it was such a long time ago, but we were playing a band. I don't even know the band, but they were a traveling band or a touring band, and they came, and you go, look, they look like horticulture kids.
Yeah. I mean,
sorry, that fell so flat, but I'm sorry.
No, hey, look, I'm happy.
Think of that all the time.
I would assume that they were wearing some mud on them, maybe some overalls.
I know how you come up with these things, but it was awesome. You don't remember that, though, do you?
I don't. I don't remember that at all. No.
Damn you.
Yeah.
Oh, man. So what do you want to do? You want to get some track by track into this action here?
Yeah, I think we've made the people wait long enough.
All right, cool. Would you like me to start off with the first track?
Yeah, why don't you tell the people where gravity hit you?
All right, so we get, in the beginning, if feeling is what they want and feeling is what they get, I'm assuming.
Oh, yeah.
Is that from a movie, or is that Brandon actually saying?
I have no idea.
I couldn't find it anywhere, so I'm thinking it's something maybe in the studio?
Something maybe they came up with, something that,
I liked it.
Yeah.
Then, bam, you get this heavy 90s style guitar riff that really makes your head bob back and forth, man. And as I mentioned before, I had to keep checking the year on this because it sounded like from the 90s. You get these metal-esque riffs. The overall production, everything felt like a throwback. And, there is more music without lyrics than music with lyrics, but I'm okay with that on a track like this, and actually with this style. So I thought it was a great opening track. What about you?
Yeah, I wrote that down as well. Right. I love the big chug of this. Love the setup for this record. Right. How important is an opening track? Those first few seconds to really draw you in. That's what I always tell people whenever I want to recommend this record to somebody, I go, put it on when you're going to the gym, right before you get on whatever the first piece of equipment you're going to use is. Because you hit play, you hear, it feels what you want, it feels what you get, oh yeah. And then you start working out and you're like, oh yeah, oh, I am feeling this. Totally. So it's got a great energy to it. Yeah. The second song is Drop. Which I love. Quick and punchy, right, little intro, just kind of really get you going. Brings back some of the punk rock to the hardcore roots, right? But I love that they use this. I mean, one of the things I like about this record, his less is more approach to lyrics.
Yeah.
This is a great one because I think there's all of 6 lines in this song, but just a really great. We're going to get into the groove of this. We're setting up a lot of the tone. I think a lot of bands would have glued Gravity and Drop together. And I think that would have been a mistake. I like the idea of keeping these tracks separate and using them to build the record. What'd you think of Drop?
Yeah, so it's cool as you get this modern hardcore band that doesn't try to sound like death metal, to be honest with you. And man, I appreciate that. Again, I'm hearing 90s all over here. I love the rhythm and the guitar riffs. You could just hear they're more than just, again, that label of a hardcore band. It starts off with the fast punk velocity. It's a super simple track, but the simplicity is what works here. So again, another great track, and have gravity and drop. I mean, hey man, that's awesome. That's awesome. Then we get Phased Out. I hear a lot of Rage Against the Machine here. I love the intro. I love how it picks up on the verses. The chorus reminds me of some 80s, actually, metal. You get a ripping solo here, and it's not just all chords. So you could tell these dudes can play. Yeah, you could tell they could play their instruments. And I heard, I don't know, Mark, if you're familiar with them, but there's a band from Puerto Rico called Puya. And I kind of heard some of that band in this song too. But I thought Phased Out is another great song. What about you?
Yeah, Puya might be a stay tuned because I have not heard of Puya.
Okay.
But no, I love this. That solo, you're right. That solo shreds, which
right?
is, you're expecting kind of this, just kind of big, rich, groovy band, right? Because they really do that groove very well. And they're building up the song Phased Out. I like the multiple uses of the chorus and the way they build. Really cool. But to throw a guitar solo like that in there was really cool. I really dig it.
Yeah.
The next track is Can't Deny It.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I love the woes in this, and the way he sings this song. Right, this is where I thought they maybe use a little reverb, but he's singing, which is awesome because you're not just getting throaty grunts or kind of that talking singing that we've talked about. He's really trying to sing here, which is cool because if you listen to this record back to back with Time and Space, the follow-up album, you really feel like this is part of the platform that they use to push that album into much deeper and I want to say thicker textures of sound. And I really think it starts with this record and this track in particular for that next one. But I love, this kind of rock and roll that drive, the delivery and pushing the boundaries of just kind of this style and its ability to flow and groove as it's doing. I really dig this song. What'd you think?
Yeah, I thought it was the first standout thus far, 4 songs into the album, although the other 3 are fantastic as well. I hear 311. I hear some Chili Peppers in here too, especially that echoey chorus. I mean, you get these big guitar riffs with the rapping lyrics, then the chorus of Can't Deny It. It sounds very Sound System from 311. It's another great track showing that they're not going to stay stationary with the style. And really their musical progression is inevitable, and Mark just gave it away that it happens in the follow-up album.
Spoiler alert, sorry guys.
Yeah, it's okay, no worries. Mark, now we get Bleach Temple. It's a nice melodic intro, again, almost masters they're almost masters of the rhythmic guitar riff. It's an instrumental, right? But it's almost to the middle of the album. It's a short album, so it's a nice and interesting break. Musically, I don't mind it. It doesn't go on for too long. I mean, it's an instrumental track, so you can only say so much. But Mark, Bleach Temple?
Yeah, I think they do a good job of setting up just this really kind of fun, rocking instrumental. It's got some cool groove to it. And Frank nailed it. The best thing this does is not go on too long. Right? How often do you hear us say, this would have been really cool if the song ended 2 minutes earlier, right? This song clocks in like at 2 minutes. Like this was absolutely the right way to do a little instrumental to bridge the front half of the record to the back half of the record.
Yeah.
So with that said, Bad Wave is next.
Yeah.
And this one, I feel like, typically you guys hear me and Frank talk about lyrics a lot. I feel like this is the best case scenario for lyrics on this record. And I actually really like the imagery and what he does with these. So I'm just going to read the first stanza for you, just to kind of place that image for the listener at home. If you haven't listened ahead like you're supposed to.
Nice.
I've been stuck in a real bad wave, put my head in some real dark places, worked up, mind shot, gonna learn to find love in what I got, but I still can't shake it. I can't shake it. Simple. To the point. Retrospective without overselling anything. Plus it's got a cool guitar riff, and it sounds fucking awesome, really loud.
Yeah, I felt this track kind of came out of nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen live performance, and I see the bass player actually singing the song, but I've also seen a live performance of Brandon singing it as well. I don't know who is actually singing it on the album. Doesn't matter to me because it's absolutely
I believe, and apologies for cutting you off.
No, go ahead.
On the record, the bass player sings the second half.
Got it. Okay, got it.
So, but I think it really works to exchange, a lot of times you see we let the bass player sing this one, right? And you get not necessarily a Matt Freeman situation, but you end up, where it's just kind of I feel like with this one, and I've seen some of those live performances where you see them kind of do both parts.
Yeah.
It really works. It kind of ties him in with the crowd a little bit more. It pulls people in. Some of the live footage you see, his verses will go to the audience because he's on the floor rocking out. But it's really kind of a fun song to see them play live.
Yeah, it's great. Again, I get the Nick Hexum from 311 kind of style voice. I get some Dinosaur Jr. style guitars. For being so short, it's a gem, an absolute gem on the album. So, and I can see why it's one of their more popular songs. So, Blue by You, just an absolute fantastic track. The eighth track is Out of Rage. You get nice drowning sounding like a bass riff here. Love it mixed in with the drums. I like the build up when he goes, "You better rage," and then it kind of tones back down and brings us kind of to the beginning. They have a short amount of time to work with here because these songs are short and they're over before you know it. But well done with the space that they created as far as the length of time goes. Mark, out of Rage.
Yeah, Out of Rage is cool. I definitely see where a lot of people compare, particularly this song, to Rage Against the Machine. Lyrically, there's that repetitive chorus. Musically, again, Rage Against the Machine, arguably one of the best rhythm sections in rock and roll history. And a lot of people will go on and on about Tom Morello's guitar playing. But what you've never noticed is that band lacking, because they don't. That rhythm section is awesome. And this rhythm section does a great job, not of mimicking that, but of honing it. And this song is a great example of that. If I could, because we kind of flew through Blue by You.
Yeah.
I dig... there's a little bit of punk speed right up front, and they pare it down. And I love the kind of the haunting chorus of Blue by You. I'm not going to sing it for you guys, but I really dig the way they did that.
Yeah.
You want to jump in to Bring It Back?
Bring It Back. So again, this showcases their brand of we'll say hardcore, right? Because they are a hardcore band. That it makes you want to move, right? This is another song where it's so much more than what it appears on the surface. It's old school sounding, but it's fresh enough not to sound like it's any sort of ripoff or anything. And this song showed to me that they're really making a conscious effort to bring back those influences. But in a way, again, that's their own. And I love it. I thought it was another great song. What about you?
Yeah, I absolutely love the use of the bass in this is big and heavy. He's almost playing it like it's a guitar. And the idea of stay away, bring it back, and the other way, right? Of finding a way to bring something back that's not harmful to you in a positive manner with this energy and groove that's really been riding through the whole record. Really kind of cool. I really dig this song. The next one is Addicted.
Addicted, yeah.
Yeah, Addicted. How's that for the intro? Just punk rock, punch you in the face, and then kind of lull you back into that groove.
Yeah, another, it's fast hitting, thrashy punk, right? So here we go, another genre I'm throwing out there.
Mhm.
It could be a little repetitive with the lyrics. I mean, I like the chunky breakdown part, the give it to me. That part though being repeated. It was one of maybe the lesser, I think, tracks on here. By no means is it a bad track, but. Compared to the first 9 thus far, this could have been for me maybe one of the more weaker ones. Again, I like the intro part and I like the chunky breakdown. It was just the repetitive of the give it to me. But that by no means is me saying it's a bad song. That's just my observation. That's all.
Yeah. What I love about it is the use of the bass for the outro that they fade into Love Lasso.
Well, yeah, that's okay. No, that's interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
I thought that was a really cool transition. And if I have any complaints about this record is I feel like those two together should have been the last tracks of this record, but we'll get into Stress in a minute.
Yeah.
This is another instrumental.
Yeah.
But I really like the way it transitioned. It showed off the band's technical abilities and strength, while at the same time just being a cool number at the end of the track. I really would have loved to see this be the fade out. Would you say?
Yeah. Again, we get another instrumental. Is that needed or not? I don't know. But if you look at the album on a whole, it fits. To me, it sounds like two people falling in love on a warm summer night, my man.
Sure. Sure.
It's definitely a different vibe than the other instrumental track, Bleach Temple. Again, it showcases their musical abilities, their liking of, I think, melody. They give me a warm summer feeling, although where we live, it's always summer, so I always get a summer feeling. But yeah, it's welcomed. It's not too long, like you say, Mark. So it's not like, oh my God, when is this going to be over? This is 3 minutes, not even close to that. So yeah, Love Lasso. It's definitely an interesting track. And then we get Stress. Mark, what's your take on Stress as the closer?
I dig this track, but as I said, I would have liked to see it somewhere else. I would have liked to see it either 3, 4, or 5 slot in terms of this record, right? It would have put Bleach Temple to 6, like dead middle of the record, because it's got a little more groove. And I just didn't love the fading out on kind of this, kind of standard hardcore groove, and the record's over. I mean, it works if you've got the album on repeat, because then, just kind of grooving, and then you jump back into If They Won't Feel It, right? So, but I mean, it works. Lyrically, he's not doing anything crazy.
No.
They're pretty simple lyrics. They're not overly cliche, which is phenomenal. In a genre that's occasionally known for being just too tongue in cheek, too much about not forgetting your bros and all that kind of stuff. I feel like he did enough to make it impactful without going over the top. And then, musically it works. It's great. But for me, again, I would have loved to see this either tracks 3, 4, or 5.
Yeah.
And I think it would have been a pretty close to perfect record at that point. What genre of record is hard for me to say. But I feel like it really would have worked.
Yeah,
a little bit better, and I feel like the record works as it is, anyways.
Yeah, I would have liked to have seen this up on the track listing as well. I got some Pantera on the guitar harmonics here. Did you hear any of that, or?
Yeah, well, they do a good job of those big chunky riffs, and I could definitely see where you'd pull a little Pantera out of that. So yeah, I could see that.
You could see that.
Yeah.
Again, great riffs. It was kind of like a harder and much heavier moments of Fugazi as well. You mentioned the tongue-in-cheek aspect of hardcore. We talked about like H2O when you mentioned like family and all that stuff, or?
Well, I mean, I think that they're definitely kind of the poster boy for, like it or not, cliche hardcore lyrics, right?
I had to ask because I was like, okay, that
even
was the first band I thought of.
Yeah, if you look at bands like Cro-Mags and Madball and that era, certainly that prototypical New York hardcore, right? Which that's a whole other subgenre within itself.
Oh God, yeah.
You know, and the lyrical structures there, you know, there's a lot of that kind of like, you know, this one's from my boys and that kind of stuff. And I think that these guys do a good job of not doing that, of thoughtful lyrics that aren't overly complicated.
Mm-hmm.
They're not, you know, one of the things, and this is one of the things Frank, you'll usually hear him say is, well, give me some more of that.
Yeah.
Tell me what you're talking about. And I haven't heard you do that.
Yeah.
You know, these lyrics are simple enough that they work without people going, yeah, but so what girl dumped him?
Yeah, exactly.
Right? And that kind of thing is like, what do you mean she left you at the Walmart? Like, why were you at Walmart? Right? Like, it's not, these lyrics don't do that. And I appreciate that. Right. You know, it's not really a love song on here per se.
Right.
Short of maybe Love Lasso, but who knows? You know, that might just be what they thought a fun title was. You know, so it's interesting. You know, punk rock and hardcore punk rock, they're not known for love songs. So, you know, I think this works in terms of the ethos and what they do musically. You know, that the energy, which is really what I hoped you had captured out of this record.
Yeah.
Was that energy? Absolutely.
I mean, energy, the rhythms, the grooves. So you get some surprises there. The vocals, you know, the lyrics again. Listen, that doesn't all the time have to be life changing. And I think in the context of this record, we don't need it to. They're not preachy. Actually, thank God they're not preachy. I give them props for not even going that route. So, yeah, I absolutely appreciate so many facets of this album. If there was one small thing at first I may have thought of, but again, in the context of this album, now even talking about it, I don't even think it's needed, is that in this short space, they left a lot of musical real estate where there wasn't any lyrics. And at first I was like, oh, maybe they should have been adding it more. But the more I listened to it, I was like, no, I was like, they placed everything correctly. And that was the only thing I had in the beginning of it. But, you know, Mark, we talked about it. I did a little sneak peek ahead of Time and Space, and I liked it. And
that's a cool record, right?
Yeah, and I liked the progression, and I could see that this band has become and will become a staple, not only in the hardcore community, but just underground. I mean, because their work ethic, their consistency for performances, I think if they continue down this path, they might get that category of kind of like important bands, because their take on sounds that we all love is kind of circling back. It's not a cheap knockoff by any stretch of the imagination, right? Not at all. I just think they're going to continue to push that boundary, and I really am kind of excited to see where this band goes. I think it was a great suggestion, Mark.
Thank you. Well, I'm definitely happy you liked it. You know, I like to describe these guys as what the Refused wanted to come out of the Shape of Punk to come, right? Was this idea that you can grow something you love into something bigger, right?
Yeah.
I'm all for paying homage. I'm all for doing, you know, traditional style stuff. But at the same time, if you're not pushing it to grow, if you're not challenging a style or a known entity to make it something bigger and cooler, then what are we doing it for? Yeah. And I feel like these guys have really embraced that idea. You know, there's a little bit of, and a very small bit. I think the next record's as short as this one. I think they're both like 27 or 28 minutes. But, you know, there's a little bit of EDM in there. There's, you know, some electronic. There's some additional vocals of different things that really progress and change. You know, they released some singles where an EDM guy remixed some of their songs. And those didn't particularly catch for me. Yeah. But I think it's cool that, you know what, they're willing to push that envelope and that idea. So I really think we're looking at cool things to come from them. And I'm stoked that you dig it. You want to tell people about the paradox that is 1999?
Oh man, so this, you know, Mark's probably been tired of me talking about it for a while, and I would tell him, man, listen, 99 was such a shitty year in music. And why was it shitty? Well, because when I was kind of purging all my mainstream stuff and getting into punk rock, you know, 2 years prior, or maybe like 97 through 98, you know, a lot of then the bands that were coming from that genre were getting popular, right? unless when Blink-182 was getting popular. Not even punk bands, but there was Korn was a big underground band that people at least were attracted to those first two albums. Then all of a sudden they get on TRL and they're mixed in with Backstreet Boys, Britney Spears, and Sync, and it watered down things in my personal opinion. So for a while I was like, oh, 99 sucks. But then as I researched it, I realized, oh, wait a minute, there's a bunch of albums that I like that I listened to from the year 1999 that are really good. So Mark had a great idea. Mark, you want to kind of tell him about the whole paradox here?
Yeah, so that in itself is kind of the paradox, right? How did a year that sucked so hard for music turn out so many awesome records? So next week, we're going to dive belly flop first into the year 1999.
Love a good belly flop, by the way.
We're going to talk about some terrible albums.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about some things going on culturally that affected it. You know, your TRLs, your Woodstock 99, your, that kind of smorgasbord of garbage and acceptance. And then we're going to get into some really awesome records and some reasons that, maybe it wasn't the worst year in music we could think of.
Maybe just on the surface it was.
Yeah, maybe on the surface it was. So next week, we're calling it the Paradox of 1999 because the flaming bag of dog shit that was 1999 seems slightly less appropriate now. So tune in if you've got a request or a piece of 1999 you would like for us to include.
Yeah.
Leave us a comment on any of our social media. You can call Frank on his personal number at
867-5309, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
The area code is 666 for that. So just leave him a voicemail, where you're calling from, your name, and what you want to hear. No, but leave us a comment. We'd love to include your thoughts on the year 1999. The 90s were such a weird time for music. So the end of it certainly should have gone out with a wet fart, and it kind of does. But we'll talk about it.
And keep in mind too that 99, right, prior to Y2K too, which was a whole other kind of piece that was creeping into pop culture and music and stuff like that. It's a weird year for us all. We're gonna chat about it, take you back. We won't spend too much time on Nookie and Limp Bizkit. I promise you that. Yeah,
I gave him a time limit.
Yeah, time limit on that, so I won't be chatting about it for so long. But as Mark said, man, hit us up, call me. Let me know what you want to hear. Tell me your astrological sign too while you're at it, and we'll just go from there.
Frank also reads tarot cards, so make sure to take him up on that. Leave us a comment and rate us, review us.
Yep,
900
give us a like.
Yeah, like us, love us.
Instagram, YouTube, all the good stuff. We're out there. We're cool guys. And then we'll see you next time.
He thinks I'm a cool guy.
I know you're a cool guy. Be well, everyone.
Bye-bye.